Hello, welcome to Live with Austin D. Jordan. I'm your host, Austin D. Jordan, and it is my pleasure to introduce my lovely co-host, Miss Nova Kemp. Nova?
Hello, everyone. How are y'all? Good to be here.
And she asked a question because you guys can answer. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's funny. Anyway, I do have to take a moment to talk about something a little serious that happened here in Roanoke, Virginia, which Nova and I are both in Roanoke. This past week, WDBJ7 lost two of its members. One, they were doing a live broadcast, and they were kind of shot and killed in the line of duty. So tonight I'm wearing maroon for Adam Ward, and Nova is wearing teal for Allison Parker. So we care about lots of things here. But let's make things light and get into this special guest that we have tonight. Not that he's light; he's a very serious guy, from what I've learned over the past 5 years. But he does like some fun things, I must tell you. He's big into entertainment. Something about a wedding thing, we might have to get into that here in a moment as well, just for fun. But he's an award-winning writer, one of the best fantasy football experts in the world, and that's coming from me, and that's my opinion. He's worked for Fox Sports. He's worked for the Detroit Lions. I believe it was 2009 SI Sports Writer of the Year. But anyway, without further ado, I could talk about this guy all night, introducing Mr. Jay Clemons. How are you doing tonight, Jay?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on the show again. That was it doesn't seem like it was 2 years ago, but yet
Yeah. 2 years ago, I had Jay on live with, NFL VR Live, which just shows kind of replace that so I can get celebrities and all kinds of people I know instead of it just being fantasy football. But tonight, it's just fantasy football, so if you don't like fantasy football people, I'm sorry, you're probably just not going to want to watch this episode, but you've been forewarned. Anyway, speaking of fantasy football, Jay, how on earth did you become so prominent in this industry? And now, I know you give great information. I give great information. There's a lot of people that give some good information. But you, man, you're one of the best there is, one of the most well-known and everything. So how did you really get into the fantasy world?
I am an accidental tourist in the land of fantasy. When I was working for Sports Illustrated, 2008, they didn't really devote a lot of resources to fantasy, but the people who they had gone away or gotten other jobs or whatever, and they needed somebody fantasy. And since I was already on the payroll, they asked me to try it, and I'm like, I play it all the time, but I've never really thought of writing about it. At the time I was a serious editor. I did Peter King's Monday Morning Quarterback. I put that to bed a lot on Sundays, so I thought there was no way. And then people kept badgering and say, all you do is talk about fantasy football. I'm sure you can write about it. So we just happened to, I said, okay, I'll do it for 1 year. And I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but the very first year I won the award for Fantasy Sports Writers, the Football Writer of the Year. So I was kind of pigeonholed into that spot. And then things really took off when Twitter came. Because when you're just posting your story on MySpace, no one's really seeing it. But once Twitter came here, things really took off. And I like Facebook, I like LinkedIn, but the one social media thing that I really adapt to, I live and breathe it. When I'm watching Golden Girls at 3 in the morning typing, I am also on Twitter. So Twitter is my favorite thing. And so Twitter, fantasy football, and me, that's a threesome there technically, but it's a perfect marriage nevertheless.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned 3 a.m. because this guy, he literally says, tweet me your questions and I will answer you. And he's not kidding. I've seen him answer. I'm an early bird sometimes, and sometimes I'm up very late. You know how it is in the fantasy world when you're trying to put together like an article late at night or whatever, or if you're dealing with clients that have done something stupid and you're trying to be their publicist and make up for it. So you can get up at all hours of the night. And I swear I'll see Jay answering questions at 3 o'clock in the morning, like you said, or 6 o'clock in the morning. He's like, I'll just take a nap and then I'll get up and I'll answer your questions again. So is that about right, Jay?
There's this wonderful Seinfeld where Kramer comes up with the idea. I think he's stealing an idea from Leonardo da Vinci, where he sleeps every 15 minutes. That's not me. That's a little extreme. But like he takes a 15-minute nap every 3 hours. But I am a constant napper. I can sleep in if I absolutely have to and I have nothing to do. But during this time of year, I have nothing to do. I have plenty to do. So I nap constantly, but at the same time, it's never more than an hour and a half. And this is how I run. This is how I've been doing it my whole life. My parents thought there was something wrong with me, and eventually everyone said, okay, we'll just deal with it. It's fine.
Well, we'll see this.
I would never survive on that.
Yeah.
I have to have my 8 hours.
Yeah, and this fatal flaw of not sleeping has paid off because look at you. I mean, you're doing great. You've been with Fox Sports and Sports Illustrated. How were your days at not to say anything negative, but how were your days at like Fox South? Because I mean, I know you had a great relationship with
My
them
time
over.
at Fox has ended. Fox dropped their writing program
Right.
altogether. Had nothing to do with me. In fact, the day that I heard about that we were being dismissed, I set a non-football Saturday record for web hits. So it's one of those things where, it's a business and you gotta roll with the punches. And I'm teaching one sports journalism class at a local college here in Atlanta, and I can't wait to get to that class lecture when I tell the kids, if you stay in this business enough, you will get fired, okay? It's going to happen. You just have to learn not to vent on social media, and you can learn to handle it like professional and move on because things are always going to be changing in this industry. But as good talent, good work ethic, all that stuff, being creative, being resourceful, that like the cream rises on many things. So, I wish Fox no ill will. I mean, they made a decision to drop everybody in the company, so it's hard to take something like that personal. And I started a temp blog in the meantime this month because I have to write. Like I can't not write. It's one of those things. No one's paying me to write, and yet I'm still writing at 4 in the morning just because I love this stuff. And I've been talking to other companies. I've got a couple contracts sitting in my computer. I just haven't signed anything yet.
Ah, well, that's good. Kind of recharging your batteries a little bit, so to speak, and getting your content out there anyway. So that's pretty awesome. Well, speaking of your content, that's a perfect segue there, Jay. You're doing great, man. Maybe you should be a director or a producer as well. I mean, I know you love Hollywood stuff, right?
You know what? I'm not a huge movie watcher, but I am a TV sponge. I will watch Seinfeld. I will watch New Girl. I will watch Family Guy, Simpsons. I mean, that's all I do is watch.
Golden Girls.
DVR. DVR is the greatest thing because USA Network has a Modern Day Family on Friday and Sunday. I'll just tape like 10 straight episodes on both days and just sit there and watch it. And so I'm not a huge moviegoer. Like the last movie I went to go see, I went home to see my parents. We went to go see Mission Impossible. But outside of that, I haven't seen another movie in the theater this calendar year.
Huh. Yeah, I think that Nova can relate to one of those programs. I know what's that one you like so much, Nova, that he mentioned?
Oh, New Girl?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Great,
Yeah. Everybody likes Zoe Deschanel. Anyway, so the segue I was going for before I took us off road there. Let's talk about some of your content here. Let's talk about like who are some of the guys you really like. Maybe your top 5 guys at quarterback. Let's just start there.
Okay, well, quarterback, it's pretty simple to me that I think it should be Andrew Luck, but at the same time, like everyone wants to point out that Aaron Rodgers is certainly more prolific. If I'm doing this on a thing where I absolutely need a quarterback for a day, and maybe the matchups are the same, I'll probably go with Rodgers. But I just think that given the competition that Luck has, the schedule he has this year, he has obviously 6 games against his own division, and then he has 4 against the NFC South. With the progress that he's making, with the receivers that they have, with Andre Johnson, Frank Gore, and even Philip Dorsett added to that roster, that Dante Moncrief was kind of developing as well, and then of course you got T.Y. Hilton. I just think Luck makes perfect sense as the number 1 guy. It's basically 1A, 1B, him and Aaron Rodgers, and then there's a drop-off after that. There's probably a next cluster, and I'll include 4 people here, in no particular order. This is how I have it, though. Peyton, Big Ben, Drew Brees, and then I would probably add Russell Wilson in that group. So it's more of a big 6 than it is a top 5.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's funny because I was doing a radio spot and they asked me my top 5, and I almost said the same thing. We're a little bit flip-flopped, and there's one other guy that you left out of your second cluster that I like, which is Tony Romo this year. But yeah, very very close. On what I think as well. So that's pretty cool.
But at the same time, I'm also going on the assumption as he's getting older, and we're all getting older, obviously. But his seems to accelerate. You just can't trust him for more than 14 games. So I think if we're just talking a cumulative standpoint, Romo is probably in that next tier of Matthew Stafford, Eli, Phillip Rivers, Ryan Tannehill, Cam Newton. I had Cam Newton at 7 before Kelvin Benjamin's injury. I just think Carolina has the worst group cluster of playmakers involving running backs and receivers this year, and I think Cam just doesn't have the legs to run for 12, 15 touchdowns like he did as a rookie, or at least have that capacity. So I think Cam is in that third cluster of quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I actually had Cam at 3 before because I really thought he would rush for about 800 yards and maybe 8 touchdowns this year.
Healthy.
Um,
You
you
cannot
know,
underrate that. Like I know he doesn't have Benjamin, but he's healthy, and
yeah.
that's a lot of 1 yard touchdowns when they get in the end zone. That's a lot of 2 point conversions if they do that. Like not a
Mhm.
lot, but probably more than the next quarterback after that. So you have to take that into account for sure.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was at. So good to see that. I respect Jay. That's why he's on this show. I love Jay Clemons and his content. So you definitely have to check him out for fantasy football content. Anyway, so let's go to running backs. Maybe your top 5, and I have a funny feeling we're going to have a big difference in number 1 here, but we'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, okay. The top 3 to me are pretty much, and you could even include Le'Veon Bell. I have Bell at number 3 on a per game standpoint. If you could get past the 2 games
Hmm.
suspension, then Bell would probably be your number 1 guy from weeks 3 to 17.
Yeah.
After that, he had 2,200 yards last year. He had, I believe, 100 total yards. My level of an elite level guy is somebody who can get 100 total yards and or 1 touchdown pretty much every week. And I believe Bell had that 14 times last year, which led the NFL. So it's one of those things where if you think he can be number 1, do it. But from a total cumulative standpoint, I have Jamal Charles at 1, Adrian Peterson at 2, Le'Veon Bell at 3, and Eddie Lacy at 4. And that's like you could make a case for any of those guys being numbers 1, 2, 3, or even 4.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually have Lacey at 1 in all formats. I just think he's going to be a little more involved in the passing game than he was last year, which is saying a lot. But then you lose Jordy, so that kind of elevates that a little more maybe. And I think, honestly, and this is going to sound maybe a little crazy, but I think Lacey's got a chance to score maybe 20 touchdowns this year, and that would be huge if that happened.
Any of these guys has the capacity for 15. You got to ask yourself, Green Bay has the most prolific offense. It's a great passing offense, but you're right. They don't have a problem giving the ball to Lacey at the 1 or 2 yard line. So, of course, that's a big factor. So 20 touchdowns is obviously ambitious any year but I think 15 with guys like that it's probably not going to happen for all 4, but at the same time, every single year in their prime, those guys have the capacity for that. I will say this about Charles. Of his last 35, 36 games, I believe, dating back to Thanksgiving of 2012, he has 100 total yards and or 1 touchdown 29 times. The only problem with that is that his last 3 games last year to finish the year, he didn't get that at all. So you could argue that he was at a cold snap. I had him at number 1 or number 2 or number 3 a few years ago when he was just taking off because he had a monster game of 259 yards against the Broncos in Week 17. I want to say that was 2008 or 9. And I had this huge jump, and everyone was like, no, way too early. He's not there yet. But, you cannot underrate somebody having a monster game at the end of the year because teams kind of know this is the guy we're going to be riding next year. Let's see if he can. It's almost like a glorified spring training game or an exhibition game where you're just kind of testing it to see what it is, knowing full well that will be your strategy for the next year.
Yep, I completely agree, and that's terrific insight. Well, let's go to some of your cluster top 5 wide receivers around in that area.
Okay, well, let's talk about standard. These are standard scoring rankings I have.
Right.
I just published the PPR Spectacular. You asked me how I got started in this business. The very first thing I ever did outside of like an introductory column for SI, I did like a PPR column because I had a PPR draft coming up. And selfishly, I wanted to prepare myself for it. So I did it, and it's kind of evolved into this monster thing where we had the 8th annual one, keeps getting bigger and better, every year, and I keep getting more clicks for it. So it's one of those things where that thing is kind of taken off, and I'm happy to see so many people in PPR leagues. That said, for non-PPRs, straight up standard scoring, I have Antonio Brown at 1, Odell Beckham at 2, Dez Bryant at 3, Julio Jones at 4, and then Calvin barely over Demaryius Thomas at number 5.
See, I like that. I really am high on Calvin Johnson this year myself, so he's definitely in my top 5 wide receivers, so I agree completely. I'll be honest, I have Julio, like, the receivers are funny because, you could take 6 guys and they could be number 1 this year. I think Dez will be number 1 this year just because, the touchdowns, it's just whatever, a little bit like.
You need Dez to score touchdowns because he just doesn't have the targets. And targets are king in this world. And one of the greatest things to happen to fantasy indirectly was about 4 years ago. Troy Aikman started quoting targets in his analysis, and a lot of people at the time had no idea what that meant because they're like, "What is a target?" And you could tell that he either plays fantasy or he knows somebody very well that plays fantasy, and he integrates targets into his thing because most receivers, unless you're Jerry Rice in your prime, the only way you can score is if someone throws it to you. You're not taking reverse 25 yards for a touchdown. So you need Dez to score because he just doesn't get the amount of targets that Brown, Beckham, Julio, Demaryius, Alshon Jeffrey, A.J. Green, and even Calvin get from a per-game standpoint. So if you have Dez at number 1, you better hope that he finds the end zone at least 12 times. Otherwise, the numbers won't really add up.
Yeah, and I do. I think he has the ability to maybe score 16 this year, basically 1 a game. Obviously, he'll have some games where he has 0 and others where he has 2. But yeah, now let me get into the tricky one because I think outside of the top 3 tight ends, I think this is the craziest position this year. I mean, I love all kinds of guys. So who do you have kind of as your top 5, or are you kind of in that same boat with me?
You know, it's crazy. And I don't know if I need it to be crazy, but I don't have a choice because I refuse to take Rob Gronkowski in round 2. And I have tons of friends that have had their drafts already, and everyone takes Gronk, and everyone comes up to me saying, "Hey, I got Gronk in round 2." They have this big smile, thinking that I'm gonna like pat him on the back. When I almost want to punch him in the face because you better hope that Gronkowski, his numbers over the last 23 games have been great, but you can't waste a pick that high on a tight end unless you are absolutely certain that you are smarter, you're a smarter drafter than everybody else, because it's like taking a quarterback really high or taking a tight end or even taking a defense really high. You're putting pressure on yourself now to draft like getting great depth at running back and receiver down the line. And I like Gronk. I'm not knocking him at all, and I value what he brings to fantasy. But at the same time, a dominant tight end is no better than a dominant kicker. Remember, David Akers set the NFL record, I believe, 4 years ago for field goals made in a year with 44. His numbers next to the next guy were very similar to Gronk and the next tight end, but you're not taking obviously you're not taking David Akers in round 2. But that's like the akin of taking a kicker in round 9. Like, you're just not going to do it, and so I understand what people are doing, but I'm just never going to endorse it. So I have Gronk at number 1, that aside. Jimmy Graham at 2, Greg Olsen at 3, Martellus Bennett at 4, and then Julius Thomas over Jordan Cameron, Kobe Fleener, and Travis Kelce at number 5. These are standard scoring rankings, I should say.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, all those guys are great picks, and yeah, I haven't taken Gronk. Like last year, going into the year, I said I would take Gronk in the 5th round if he fell to me. And if you remember, there were lots of questions. So he did fall to me, even in money leagues last year in the 4th and 5th round. I would step up, take me in the 4th. But that was last year, going into last year. This year,
did he play in any preseason games last year? I honestly cannot remember.
No, I don't think he did. I don't think he played in any preseason games, and there was a lot of speculation that he's going to miss week 1 and all that.
You want to take Gronk in round 5? I'm all for it. Okay, so it's one of those things. If he should fall to you, I had a mock draft the other day where Odell Beckham slid to me at the end of round 3 because he doesn't have any preseason catches. Well, he didn't have a preseason or a September last year, and he still ended up being this amazing guy. Had double-digit targets, I believe, in his last 7 games, including 21 or 22 in the finale against the Eagles. Like, don't worry about preseason stats. I'm watching Dolphins-Falcons as we speak right now, and I really don't care what happens. You know.
Yeah, you sound like me. I've got it on NFL Network, watching all the different games here or whatever.
Like it beats.
You can't tear yourselves away, can you?
Yeah. It beats watching like CSI, I guess, on a Saturday night. It's white noise. You know, it's great. Just don't get hurt. That's all I care about.
It is Saturday night. That being said, we could be taking our significant others out instead of.
I just got done working out, and I showered before this thing because I was like, I gotta call Uber as soon as we're done here. So.
Yeah, we do appreciate that. That's good. And a shower, that's always nice.
No, it's a selfish thing too, because it's really warm here in Atlanta, and after I work out, I'll go shower, and then I'll go out right away, and I'm like sweating like crazy because of the shower. So now I like to take my shower at least an hour before I go out, so I'm not a human heat pump when I get to the 2 o'clock.
Jay, I'll tell you a secret.
Very
cold shower.
No, this is another Seinfeld. Like,
I can't do a cold shower.
Showers, you'll be fine. No, showers are for people that have. I don't know. I have one bad memory. Not to go off the page here, but I was at a Presbyterian church the year we were getting confirmed. I was like 8th, 9th grade. We went on a retreat, and the boys' shower was next to the girls' room. And I made the mistake of getting in the shower before turning it on, and it was ice cold, and I screamed like crazy and woke everybody up. So I think I have a phobia of cold showers based on that one horrific incident.
I can relate. When you grow up being the youngest kid in a family and you have not a very good hot water tank, I can relate. No, I had nothing but cold showers when I grew up.
Cold showers are great if you're in the lake, but that's about it. You know?
All right, so that was fun. See, this is different. This is why people love this show, at least from some of the comments I've got. Anyway, so let's see, what do we have left? Defenses. Let's talk about some of your top defenses. Now, I have 2 defenses that people don't care for at all, and I have them in my top 5, and one of them people don't care for much, and I have at number 1. So this will be interesting to see where you're at there, Jay.
Did you tell me that we were going to discuss kickers? Oh boy.
No kickers. I said
wing it here then. I do not do kicker rankings. I used to. People used to complain. I mean, I used to not. I used to do kicker and defense rankings, and everyone would, kind of like guffaw at stuff. So I was like, it's beating the eye beholder. Okay. Yes, Seattle was the number 1 defense last year from an NFL stat point, and the Lions were number 1 for a good chunk of last year. But the Eagles were still the number 1 fantasy defense last year. They had 4 defensive touchdowns. They had 12 interceptions. They had, 49 sacks, which is about in the top third. And they had a couple kickoff returns for touchdowns. And if you haven't been watching Kenyon Barner during the preseason, there is no evidence that tells me that Philly won't be a number 3, top 3 defense again in fantasy this year. And yet you can get them in the last round while everyone else looks for the Browns. And the Browns are great on paper, but they're not great fantasy-wise. People really need to make a distinction between that, because special teams touchdowns, defensive touchdowns, all that stuff factors into the big score at the end of the day.
You're exactly right. Yeah, see, like I love the Rams as my number 1 defense because they get a lot of sacks and score. I mean, those are.
What they didn't have any sacks, or Robert Quinn didn't have a sack for the first 6 games or something like that last year. Then he kind of broke out from there. Yeah, I'm not gonna really knock any picks here. If you want to go Seattle at 1, the Rams, and people keep forgetting, when J.J. Watt scores an offensive touchdown, it means absolutely nothing in fantasy. So it's one of those things where, it doesn't mean anything. So you have to be able to separate truth from reality. If you like Denver, you like Carolina, you like Baltimore, if you like Jacksonville and Detroit, that's fine. But I'm just imploring people, if you take Cody Parkey as your kicker from the Eagles, I think he's the Eagles kicker this year, you can't take the Eagles defense because you don't want the kicker and defense having the same bye, because that means you have to make 2 transactions in the same week. But outside of that, if you can take Philly in round 16, I would rather have Philly in round 16 than Seattle in round 13. So I think that's pretty important if you really want value at every turn.
Yeah, I agree with you there. You got a little bit of makeup going on.
Me?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Done anything or moved or anything?
Okay, maybe we're just getting a funny connection. Anyway, no, but yeah, last year I loved Philadelphia going into the year. They were like my sleeper defense, and it worked out great. And I completely, agree with Jay there. Like, you need to wait on defenses, you really do. Like my cash prize leagues or whatever, we put a little bit more weight on defenses, so they go a little bit earlier. Like the first defense might go in like the 9th round or 10th round, but there's a little bit more weight on it. You have limited moves, so it makes a little more sense. But it generally.
Let me use the stat real quick against San Fran last year. The Eagles in Week 4 had 4 sacks, 1 interception, 1 defensive touchdown, and 1 kickoff return touchdown. And then the next week they had 4 sacks, and then 8 sacks against the Giants. 2 weeks later, 4 against Houston, and then 9 against Carolina with 3 interceptions. I mean, a defense like that, you could argue there's no huge stars. That defense is perfectly made for fantasy. I cannot implore people enough. Take them, wait them out till if you think round 15 they won't be there at 16. By all means, take them at 15. But do not just let Philly's defense slide as a free agent. Even if you take Seattle and Philly's still there, take 2 defenses because you're going to like Philly in the end.
Yeah, I agree with Jay wholeheartedly there. Well, let's get the fans and viewers involved a little bit here, and Nova more involved as well, since we've been just kind of chatting it up ourselves here. Nova, do we have any fan? Well, I know we have. You said we had like 15 questions already or something. So let's go ahead and just ask Jay and I the questions and see what we've got going.
Okay, the first question I have is from Mike Johnson at _mjohn10_. He asks, who is the safer option at wide receiver for the Rams fantasy-wise? Kenny Brett or Brian Quick?
All right, and I'll defer to you, Jay. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? You tell me.
No, we can alternate if you want. I'll take this one first, and then you can do it. We can alternate every question.
All right.
Frankly, I would go Kenny Britt, but you're looking at, if this is probably a Rams fan writing this question. If you want Kenny Britt as your number 5, that's fine. I like upside guys like Dorial Green-Beckham, like a rookie, or somebody taking like Odell Beckham last year that has tremendous upside. But Kenny Britt deserves to be drafted in every single draft, both PPR and standard scoring league. Brian Quick does not. He has a lot of games like you could refer to as a binary code man. He had a lot of games of 0 and 1 catches, and that's just not going to feed the Bulldog in fantasy. Like in a 12-team league, there's really no need for Brian Quick. If you want to take a flyer on Tavon Austin in terms of kick return touchdowns and just a lot of bubble screen TDs, and I would almost favor Austin's upside over somebody like Brian Quick, but Kenny Britt, to me, is definitely the answer.
All right. Well, I respectfully disagree, unfortunately. I just think that I'm assuming this is a head-to-head league. Most leagues are head-to-head, I hope. But in a head-to-head league, you can kind of call Quick when he's going to have a decent game, maybe. But like Jay said, and he's right, he has a lot of donuts, per se, and that's not good if you're counting on him week in and week out. Again, I think neither one of those guys, to agree with Jay again, I don't think either one of those guys are worthy of being like a number 3 wide receiver on your team, 4 at the highest, which means they shouldn't even really be playing for you. So that's just kind of my answer there. All right, so Nova, what's our next question?
Our next question is from Tom McCants at TMCCants1305, and I just want to say I'm sorry. I've read your question 3 times and I still don't understand it, but I'm pretty sure that he's asking, would you draft Julio Jones, Rob Gronkowski, or Marshawn Lynch in a half-point PPR league? So let's hope I got that.
All right, so for me, I would say half-point PPR. To me, that's a tough one. I would say Marshawn Lynch just because running backs are kind of king. I'm assuming he's there in the first round. And kind of to Jay's point about Gronk, it's hard for me to draft Gronk in the first round, and quite frankly, it's a little hard for me to draft Julio in the first round. I'd definitely take him in the second. So to me, Lynch is the only real number 1 pick there, for top first round pick there. So in my opinion, so that's why I would say him. Jay, what do you think?
In a standard scoring draft, I would go Marshawn. In a PPR, I'd probably go Julio. So you want to take they're kind of like it's obvious when it's standard scoring PPR. When you converge and just do half-point thing, I would probably lean toward Lynch, but put Julio directly behind him, and then Gronk would be a distant 3. I will remind people, Marshawn had 48 targets last year, receiving targets. That's the most he's ever had with the Seahawks. So, the only thing that worries me about Lynch, I don't worry about injury, things like that, and he looks like he's in fantastic shape. The only thing that worries about me is complacency, because he just had that monster contract. But here's the thing. Marshawn Lynch is playing to be in the Hall of Fame someday. If he gives 3 more years like he's had, I think he's there. So if that kind of stuff matters to him, if that kind of motivation chip is there, if he's motivated to keep Christine Michael and Robert Turbin on the bench, then that has a lot of power too. I'm kind of with you. In a standard scoring draft, I wouldn't take Julio probably till round 2. So in a half-point PPR, Julio's definitely a fringe first rounder, but I think I would want Lynch maybe 1 or 2 notches ahead of him.
Good deal. All right, next, Nova.
Tim Branta at TM Branta states, keeping Eddie Lacy and Odell Beckham Jr., I have the first pick with Andrew Luck and Le'Veon Bell kept. Do I go Aaron Rodgers, 1 point per reception, 6 points for passing touchdowns?
Who were the options again? I'm sorry, you were breaking up.
He says he's keeping Eddie Lacy and Odell Beckham Jr. He has the first pick with Andrew Luck and Le'Veon Bell kept, and asks, do I go Aaron Rodgers with 1 point per reception, 6 points for passing touchdowns?
6 points per passing touchdown? You know what? That's a good core. I would probably do that. And if I was getting this question on Twitter right now, I would yell at the other person that was asking me the question, because I need options in terms of like, who else could I be taking them over and stuff like that. But if you have a core 4 like that already, and you have 6 points per touchdown pass, let's talk about the guys that have 40 touchdowns this year. It's a very short list of Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers. So if you already have a core 4, I'm absolutely okay with you taking Rodgers without even knowing whoever else is available.
Yeah, and I kind of agree. my big thing, like Jay, is I need more input to quote Short Circuit, that movie with the robot from like 1985. Sorry, I'm old. But yeah, I mean, like I always need more information on a question like that. But if that's his core, like Jay said, absolutely reach for Rodgers. 6 points per passing touchdown. Rodgers, to me, I think is going to be the #1 fantasy quarterback in my opinion. All right, so next question, Nova.
Michael Dowler states he has a first pick in a standard league. Who would you pick?
Jamal Charles. But like I said before, about 20 minutes ago, Jamal Charles, his last 3 games did not have 100 total yards and/or 1 touchdown. So this is not the year to have the #1 pick, because you could make a case that Jamal Charles at #1 has just as much value as Marshawn Lynch at #10 or LaShawn McCoy at #11, things like that. This is not the year to have a top 3 pick. To me, this is the year to have a late pick in round 1. So you have an early pick in round 2, which means you're going to get 2 studs. The only great thing about having the top pick in my mind is that you're going to have, in a 12-team league, you'll have 1, 24, and 25. So that's 3 of the top 25, and that's looking pretty good. For me, it's more of a safety issue of Charles over Peterson and Bell and Eddie Lacy. And, like Kansas City has passed okay in the preseason, but at the same time, that offense still runs through Charles. And Charles is just a little safer pick for me at Adrian. And as we learned last year, you cannot blow it with a high pick in round 1. You probably won't win if that's the case.
Yeah, ironically, I drafted Adrian Peterson #1 overall in all my drafts last year.
For me, it's tomato. It really is,
Yeah, but as I said earlier, I go with Lacy. I think he could potentially have the upside, not my expectation, but he has the upside to maybe score 20 touchdowns, and that would just be huge. But definitely, Charles is not far behind, and Peterson's not far behind. They're kind of like, to quote Jay, 1A, B, and C, D, to be honest with you, with Le'Veon Bell as well. So it really can be anybody. But
the bottom line is, it scares me when people ask questions, who do you want to take at 1? You shouldn't have to worry about that, okay? Your worry should be round 2, round 3, round 4. A top pick should be a no-brainer pick. So even if Charles doesn't match, he's averaged, 16.5 touchdowns the last 2 years. Even if he doesn't get to that, barring injury, he's still going to have a great year. So, try not to worry about things like this. At the very least, do not overthink a move like this.
Yeah, now I will say this as well, and I think Jay would agree with me. If you do draft Charles #1, take Niles Davis late, just for the security, because Charles has been banged up.
And Niles Davis is a handcuff-worthy guy. Like Matt Asiata, not necessarily worth a handcuff. Jerick McKinnon might be if you take Adrian. Yeah, I would rather handcuff my third running back, to a guy. I'll give you a great example. Doug Martin and Charles Sims of the Buccaneers. If you can handcuff any backfield at value in terms of getting Martin in round 6, Sims in round 9, that would be the one I would want this year. Fred Jackson looked really good today. And Buffalo, Sierra Wood looked excellent against Pittsburgh. So those guys could have value late in the rounds. But right now, if we're talking the top 10 rounds, 2 guys that you could absolutely get at value I would probably do Martin and Charles Sims. You didn't ask, but I said it anyway.
Well, you know what? Since you volunteered, I'm going to volunteer. Just to fit the mold. I think that the main handcuff position at running back this season are the Dallas Cowboys. I love Darren McFadden this year. He's the guy I keep saying. I love Jay's reaction already. But I love Darren McFadden this year. I know he's been injured and all that sort of thing. But
what's to love about him? He can catch passes. He doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. Like Dallas's offensive line is good on paper, okay? But I heard Jamie Dukes, who's based here in Atlanta, does a show on Mad Dog Radio. He was saying today he does not like Lael Collins as a guard because he said he is and Jamie Dukes played in the NFL all those years. He said he's too tall to be a guard. He's a guy that wants to spread his wings and tackle. Like, you can put all these 5 All-Stars on a line, but it doesn't mean that Darren McFadden's going to hit the hole. It doesn't mean Darren McFadden will be healthy. I like Joseph Randall, but I don't know if Joseph Randall can touch the ball 18 times a game, which to me is like the definition of a workhorse or the adjusted definition of a workhorse. The good thing about it, you can get both players in the later rounds. You don't have to kill yourself to draft them on draft day.
Exactly, and my point to it is take them both and play them both. Get a true #1 running back.
I want to play you. Austin, we need to get a league together, okay? I want to be in a league where I'm playing Darren McFadden and Joseph Randall as starters as much as possible. Okay, and I love and respect all the work you do, but this one there can be no debate. You are wrong. Okay.
And I love that because you know what? He came on NFL VR Live a couple years ago. Like you said, I love Steven Jackson going into the year. I said he's going to score 10 touchdowns this year. Steven Jackson scored 3 touchdowns and sucked the whole year. And Jay was like, Austin, you're going to be wrong. I love your work. I love what you do. Same thing you just gave me, so I'm probably going to be wrong. We'll see.
I used to coach basketball back in the day, and I used to make fun of this one kid because I said he when he would get tired, he would run like he had a piano on his back. And eventually, an NFL running back has so many carries, a finite amount of carries in there, and you can be in fantastic shape like Larry Johnson was, like Steven Jackson. Steven Jackson played for the Falcons last year. Trust me, the man was in shape, okay? He was just S-H, you know what, brick house, like when he walks around. But you only have so many carries in you, and I thought he was basically that guy who's running with he looks great running downhill on a 1-yard carry, but he just kind of had that running with a piano on his back mentality in the preseason, and I just did not like him at all. So I don't mind being wrong, you know, but at the same time, in that one I was correct. You are right.
Yeah. But I do love it, and Jay, I quote you all the time on this, and I don't know if you've heard me say this on any other show or the radio I do or anything, but Jay said, I would always rather give up on a player a year too early than a year too late, and I always quote you on that and give you credit for that, Jay.
It's the Larry Johnson thing, because I clung to Larry Johnson too long, and people mocked me, and they were correct. They were correct, and I'm just thankful that Larry Johnson hit the wall before Twitter was invented in 2008, because it would have been, or at least I got a Twitter, okay, because that would have been a real problem, you know. And I wasn't bad at back then. I would have wanted to fight somebody back then, you know.
Oh goodness. Hey, let me ask you something. Okay, we're making the show way too long. Let me ask you something. In 2013, did you agree or disagree with my opinion of C.J. Spiller? Everybody else in the world was saying he's like a top 3 pick, and I said he's going to be a fantasy bust. I wouldn't draft him until the 3rd round.
I probably disagreed with you. In one of my favorite keeper leagues with the guys that I used to work with at Sports Illustrated back in the day, I took C.J. Spiller. Everyone could keep 2 players. So basically that's 24 players for 12 teams, and I had the 9th pick in round 1, and I took C.J. Spiller. And I think I had him ranked 9th overall or something like that, and I did a little happy dance. I might even throw my pillow on the floor and dance around it because I thought, oh my God, I'm getting amazing value here. And he was a bust. Now, granted, he was an injury bust because he had that 63 yard.
That's what I called. I said he'd get injured.
He fell on his chest and whatever. But you know, I'm very conservative with him this year. I like Mark Ingram. You didn't ask. But I have Mark Ingram over C.J. Spiller in terms of fantasy production this year. Mark Ingram deserves to be taken seriously. He's in that Lamar Miller, Alfred Morris group, and I think he needs to be taken seriously this year.
Yeah, he was my breakout sleeper of the year last year. And you know Brad Evans, Yahoo Noise, he completely disagreed with me, and we did it publicly, unfortunately for him. He said he would eat crow, and he did at the end of the year, unfortunately.
No, you're going to be wrong. Like, you know, there's a great line from The Simpsons when the Homer's watching. It's basically the Simpsons version of Jimmy the Greek. He's gambling on football, and the guy Jimmy the Greek was wrong, and it's Phil Hartman's voice. He goes, "Well, when you're right 51% of the time, you're wrong 49% of the time." You got to take that attitude about things, you know?
Yeah, and it's true. And the great thing, I think, I love being wrong. And honestly, it sounds kind of stupid, but in terms of fantasy football, like I love being wrong because it's like I want to go back and look at it and be like, how was I so wrong about this guy? You know, I don't
know if I want to be wrong because people, you know, I really should start doing FanDuel or DraftKings, things like that, because you know, a lot of people are making money off my predictions. I'm not making anything from my predictions. Maybe I should start doing that. So I want to be right, but you know, it's one of those things where I can tolerate being wrong. It's one of those things.
Jay, I've made a lot of money off FanDuel and DraftKings. Literally a lot. I won't get.
Never gone on sites in my lifetime. So
I'm gonna have to get you signed up. You're gonna have to trust me, man. It's easy money. I mean.
Well, that's okay. Commercial guys like, I put down a $4 bet. I've got a $2 million home right now, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that sounds convenient.
Yeah, it's not.
I would definitely hand out $4 if I knew I would end up in a $2 million home two days later. Thanks.
Well, I pride myself on being consistent, not hitting the big jackpots. I just make a couple thousand a week. Okay. Anyway, I'll shut up.
So I should just quit being an Uber driver and just start playing FanDuel professionally? Is that what
Yes,
you're saying?
yes.
Okay.
Listen, trust me, you're good enough. I know you. I know your content. You're good enough. You can do it. Trust me.
Okay.
Anyway,
Uber.
hey, if I'm in Atlanta, I know who my Uber driver is going to be.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, Nova, sorry. You were asking us questions. Please continue.
Anthony Gilbert at Scarecrow Runner asks, in a PPR league, picking fourth, is Eddie Lacy or Jamal Charles still my best option?
Yes.
I think this is my question. PPR league, if you're going fourth, if this person's watching the show, if you can get Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell, I would want them over Jamal Charles and Eddie Lacy in the PPR. Okay, so let's establish that. That said, if I had to pick between Lacy and Charles, I would probably go Charles barely in a PPR. But once again, I mean, we're really talking about differences that are negligible. But if this person is watching the show, if you can get Antonio Brown, and don't expect him to have 122 catches, but he's still amazing. He had 15 games last year of, I believe, 8 or more targets, which is insane. So if you can get Brown or Bell, I want them over Charles or Lacy.
Yeah, and I kind of agree there with the PPR league, especially. I mean, especially the first 4 weeks. If nothing else, draft Antonio Brown, get those PPR stats the first 4 weeks, and trade him away for somebody's farm. And I mean, literally their farm. Their second, third round pick probably, and they'll probably give them up to you. So anyway, all right. Next question, Nova.
John G. at Geyses states, I'm keeping Lamar Miller and Odell Beckham Jr., and I have number 1 overall pick. Should I take Aaron Rodgers, Antonio Brown, or Rob Gronkowski?
Yeah, okay, if my options are those, I'm going to say Antonio Brown. So, what do you think, Jay?
I'm going to go Brown. Definitely. I know you got a bunch of questions, so I'll try to keep this answer short. Brown is like I just mentioned, targets rule everything with receivers. PPR, standard scoring, it doesn't really matter. He even had a passing touchdown last year against Houston. In that scenario, with those 3 people, I would want Brown for sure. And keep in mind, I love Gronk. I just don't want to be that guy to take a tight end early on. So if you like him in round 2 and he's there, great. But I would prefer Brown than Rodgers than Gronk.
Agreed.
Okay. Patrick Canody at P. Canody says, pick a side, non-PPR. Lamar Miller, Brandon Marshall, David Cobb, or Jonathan Stewart, Allen Robinson, Giovanni Bernard.
What was the first?
Lamar Miller, Brandon Marshall, and David Cobb, or Jonathan Stewart, Allen Robinson, and Giovanni Bernard. I
would take the first grouping. David Cobb is an obvious throw into the trade, but here's the deal. Bishop Sankey has actually looked pretty good in the preseason, but he is no guarantee to start over David Cobb, who was a very sneaky good running back with Minnesota last year, in a year where the Big Ten had all these monster names at that spot at running back. It's probably a fair trade, but when Austin, you like quoting me and things like this. If you want to use this, like in a trade like that, give me the side that has the best player, and Lamar Miller is the best player in that group.
Yeah, I do agree that Lamar Miller is the best player in that group, but I'm really high on Jonathan Stewart this year. I think.
Why? I mean, like what? Okay, don't make me call up his stats because I'm going to do that right now. But he's been productive, but he's been a washout more often than not. Okay, yeah. I hold no ill will, but I refuse to touch any playmakers outside of Greg Olsen and maybe Cameron Artis-Payne in round 16 this year with Carolina. It's just. There's a lot of pressure on Stewart to be good. He seems to do well when there's no pressure for him to do well. And this year, like, he's going to be feeling that pinch. There's going to be 7, 8 guys in the box knowing full well that Cam really doesn't have any grade A targets to throw to outside of Olsen. So this is the year to let some other chump, and I'm not calling you a chump, Austin. I'm just saying this is the year to let some other chump take Jonathan Stewart in round 5 or 6.
Yeah, I'm that.
Hello? Are you there? Are you there, Nova? All right.
Hello.
Okay, we're back. Are you there, Nova? Can you see me?
I can hear you.
But you can't see me?
Yes, I can see you. I can't hear Austin.
Okay. Yeah, I can't hear Austin.
Okay, so you can hear me? He's gone. Are you there, Jay?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we lost him.
Okay. Well, you can ask away if you want until he
Okay, I'll go ahead. Well, T at Turk __ asks Lacey or Charles.
He had 2 underscores in his Twitter thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
It may have been a mistake. I'm not sure.
I was just trying to the double underscore. What was the question again?
Lacey or Charles. Did we already have that?
Yeah, and obviously a lot of these people send questions not knowing that they're going to be redundant.
Yeah.
I would favor Charles over Lacey, but if you want to go Lacey, I'm not going to argue with that either. I mean, they're that close. Okay.
Okay. Kevin at 2KPirate234 asks, should I do Julio Jones, Golden Tate, and Doug Martin for Jeremy Hill, Mark Ingram, and Julian Edelman? And he says, I'm getting the J Hill part.
Okay, so, I tell people on Twitter all the time, please specify if it's standard scoring or PPR. So if you don't specify, let's assume it's a standard scoring. Okay, so what was the first group again?
Julio Jones, Golden Tate, and Doug Martin, or Jeremy Hill, Mark Ingram, and Julian Edelman. And he says, I'm getting the J Hill part. You know what?
If from a better package, I think the first grouping is slightly better. But if you're that guy that wants extra running backs, there's certainly no shame in taking Jeremy Hill. I have Jeremy Hill. I believe he's in that next group. He's at my number 9 running back, right after LaShawn McCoy, and right before C.J. Anderson, Lamar Miller, Mark Ingram, things like that. I have Doug Martin as my number 13. Okay, so you have Julio and
Golden Tate and Doug Martin.
Doug Martin, and then Golden Tate to me is a top 20 receiver. It's close. I think you can make a case for both sides, but if it's just a pure talent standpoint, I would want the Julio, Doug Martin, Golden Tate side.
Golden Tate. Okay. Austin, you're back, I see.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. That was the first time that's ever happened to me in 50-some-odd episodes of shows on Google Plus Hangouts. So, strange. Apparently, I'm the one that got kicked out. But anyway.
Okay, I'll go ahead and ask you this question. The question is, should I do Julio Jones, Golden Tate, and Doug Martin for Jeremy Hill, Mark Ingram, and Julian Edelman?
No, I like the first group way more. I think
that's what Jay said.
Yeah, so I'll defer to Jay. Since he agreed with that, I'll go with whatever he said. All right, so moving on then.
Jacked Hips at Motel _guy says, in a keeper PPR where majority of top 15 running backs are being kept, do you think it's smart to hoard tight ends for trade bait? And he says he's kicking 10 and 11.
No. In a PPR, receivers are what make the world go round. So if you want to hoard anything, hoard good receivers. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Last year, I hoarded Andre Ellington, who's a running back, and Martavis Bryant at the end of the draft last year, rounds 15 and 16. And because I was confident that both of them would do well, I was at Martavis Bryant's pro day at Clemson a couple years ago, and he looked just as good as Sammy Watkins to me. So I was like, okay, I'll take a flyer on him at round 16. Hoarding a tight end, here's the deal. Kobe Fleener was in the last 5 weeks of the year, last year, weeks 13 through 17, he was the tight ends leader in targets, receptions, and receiving yards, okay? But you're not blowing anybody away by taking him in round 16. Like, he'll help you, but if you want to hoard, like, spend it, like, if you have a roster of 16 guys, if you want a 6th player from a certain position, make it running back or receiver. Hoarding tight ends just seems counterproductive to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jay. I definitely say do not hoard tight ends. And to be quite frank, this is especially not the season to hoard tight ends because there are way too many tight ends that even go undrafted. Like Ladarius Green, the first 4 weeks of the season could be fantastic as a number 1 tight end, which is kind of shocking.
He isn't being drafted in a lot of drafts because of the suspension.
Yeah, exactly.
From weeks 5 through 17, he's going to be a top 10 guy, but a lot of, in a standard draft of 12 teams, obviously you're going to have 12 tight ends taken for starting sides. There's probably 4 or 5 other guys. So you're basically talking guys 17 through 24 that aren't even being taken. So why even hoard? Yeah, it's pointless. That is a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree completely. All right, so Nova, do we have any more questions?
We have 5 more. Do we have time for them?
I don't know. Jay, how are you feeling about 5 more questions?
That's fine. Yeah, whatever.
Okay. All right. Well, if Jay's cool with it, then I'm cool with it. All right, go ahead.
All right, this